Hello everybody, welcome to another exciting episode of Just a Glimpse. Today I want to talk about the Mortal Kombat movie that just released. However, I do have to give the quick disclaimer: if you are worried about spoilers, please step away, watch the film first, because this episode will contain spoilers. The movie starts off, and I will say I liked the intro to the film. They start by introducing the character named Hanzo, and it shows his family, who is also being, watched over by some guards. Now, one thing I did want to point out that was kind of weird is you'll see his wife doing some gardening, and she's using an item that isn't a gardening tool. We'll get into it later because I feel like they just put it there so that Hanzo could use it later. But it just the way that they had the wife using it as a gardening tool was off-putting for me personally. But it's a minor detail. Now, some assassins swing in and attack his homestead, killing his family, and that assassin is named Bai-Han. Hanzo and Bai-Han then, meet up and they start fighting, and they talk back and forth, but they don't understand each other. Bai-Han speaks Chinese while Hanzo speaks Japanese, which is kind of interesting. They're over here, fighting it out, and there's this moment for some, foreshadowing where Hanzo ends up grabbing the item I had just mentioned. It's a kunai. He ends up picking up this kunai that his wife was using as a gardening tool, which, like I said, it's very weird that she would use a kunai as a gardening tool, but she's using that, so now it's just there. So he ends up using that and ties a rope to it, which, gives foreshadowing to later on when he will become Scorpion and he'll have his chain that he's known for having. All that plays out, and it's well done. Like I said, I like the intro. It's different because it doesn't follow the origin stories of the characters from the games. They definitely changed it in this adaptation. But even being different, I liked the whole scene. It was, it was well played out. I liked the cinematography of it. The fight scenes were really nice. It was a good intro. Even like I said, if you're a hardcore Mortal Kombat fan, you might be a little irked because they didn't follow the canon lore, but it was still a good scene. I can get over this part with them changing the storyline. For those of you who aren't very familiar with Mortal Kombat when it comes to lore and stuff, the movie shows the characters Hanzo and Bai-Han, who will later become Scorpion and Sub-Zero, showing Sub-Zero being the one responsible for the death of Scorpion's family. And in the games, Quan Chi is the one that killed his family. They twisted it, but it works for the film. So, like I said, it's a small nitpick for me, but I can understand other fans being upset about it. Hanzo ends up dying, but before he dies, I don't really know if it's his soul or what happens to him. But anyways, he ends up getting trapped in the Never Realm, while his baby daughter was the only survivor. Sub-Zero didn't know about the baby, which this is another thing that's kind of weird. The baby is crying non-stop prior to the attack, which for me, I would feel if you have a bunch of assassins surrounding this house and trying to figure out where all the guards are, they're going to hear the baby crying this entire time, so they would know it would be there. The mother goes in to calm the baby, and then they start getting attacked, so she hides the baby, and then they just kind of act like they didn't know the baby existed. It's just weird. It's just weird because there's no way they wouldn't have heard it. I find it kind of unbelievable that the baby wasn't crying during the attack when the baby was already crying prior to the attack, and you're gonna tell me that the mom showing up and putting that baby in a dark hole is gonna make that baby be silent? That's another stretch for me. Well, let it slide, so they can get their story developed, whatever. Alright, so those are little nitpicks. For me, they don't ruin the story. They're just things that I want to nitpick on, because I just, I found them to be a little off-putting. Anyways, you find out later, much later in the storyline, that baby is the descendant of the main protagonist in the movie named Cole, who's an MMA fighter. He's kind of like a washout. People mock him as being like a human punching bag, which is going to be foreshadowing for him for later. He's not really that much of an interesting character. Honestly, I don't understand why they went with him to begin with. I don't understand why they would have to... I had to do some research to understand the timeline of this film. This is taking place 400 years after Hanzo and his family were killed off. But yeah, so I just find that weird, because this Cole guy is a brand new character, from my understanding. He's a brand new character they just made up for this film. I at first thought that he was the baby. That maybe they were in a different realm, and then, because Raiden ends up scooping up the child. So I thought maybe Raiden took the child to Earth realm, and then, and that could have been Cole, but that wasn't it. 400 years had gone by, and you don't find that out until way later, so it was kind of didn't really know who the baby really was. So they kind of left, until way later. So that, I don't know. Which also kind of leads into some differences with timelines. Now, in the games, it's believed that Sub-Zero and Scorpion's characters were born during like 1969 and 1970, whereas in the film they're showing them, existing in the 1600s. So that's different. And then, Sub-Zero somehow managing to be able to live for 400 years is also kind of baffling. I don't understand that either. They never explained how he was able to survive 400 years without really aging too much. The whole thing just doesn't add up, because they want you to think that it takes place in the 1600s, but then at the same time they're telling you this is 400 years later. So the math doesn't even add up, because they're clearly showing what looks to be like feudal Japan. So I don't know, the whole timeline is confusing. They should have explained it. They never explained how he lived for so long. But it's, it's whatever. I guess it's not really that important to the plot. For me, I would like to have a little more clarification on how that's possible. But it is what it is. I'm trying to remember how things happen in order the best I can. I'm going to end up jumping around, though. I know I will, because I'm not going to have everything in the right order. Introduction of Jax's character to Cole is a little weird. So, Jax, I guess, is already in search of the other champions, because him and Sonya Blade, later on you find out that they, found out some stuff about Mortal Kombat and the history of it, because they ended up killing a guy in Brazil or something that held the mark, which ended up transferring to Jax, and so they wanted to find out what that meant. So they ended up, doing all the digging up on that stuff. And so then they find out that there's other champions, so then they go and they find Cole, and then, which is weird, because right when they find Cole, perfect coincidence, Sub-Zero shows up, so Jax ends up, saving Cole and his family. Now, this is a small thing, it's not really big to the film at all, but for me it's another small nitpick. When Sub-Zero attacks them at this restaurant, daughter's outside eating ice cream, Cole and his wife are inside. Sub-Zero starts attacking, he starts freezing things and throwing like giant chunks of ice or whatever. Now, this is a part that was a little weird to me immediately. He's chucking this ice, people are running around, one guy gets hit by it and gets freaking, planted on the ground because of the impact of it. Awning above the door ends up falling because of the ice and the amount of damage. So, that this stuff is having a lot of impact because things are breaking around them and stuff. But then this stuff is also hitting the SUV that Jax rolled up in. I just found it weird that this entire time, not a single window got broken on that SUV. You're seeing all this damage happening to the building, but then outside of some dents happening to the SUV, that's about it. Which for me, it felt weird, because I was expecting the windows to start getting cracked or shattered or whatever from the damage, but then the windows were pristine the entire time. And it was a small thing that I picked out. I'm like, how come the windows are perfect? Like, why is nothing breaking? Small thing. They run into Sub-Zero again in an alley, which is weird. Like, how did Sub-Zero even know which alley to pop in at that very moment? They don't explain a lot of these things. So he just pops up yet again in the right place, right time. Jax stays behind, tells Cole to get his family out of here so they don't, end up getting killed. and to go to Gary, Indiana to find Sonya Blade, of all places. Gary, Indiana, which is just weird. You know, like, no one cares about Gary, Indiana in real life, so for them to, you know, try to make that a plot point was kind of weird. But it's fine. It's not going to ruin anything. It was just funny hearing him, you know, bring up Gary, Indiana, of all places. So Jack stays behind to fight Sub-Zero. And this is also where there's some differences within the film as well as in, like, the game. So, for an example, in Mortal Kombat 9, Ermac is the one that was responsible for Jax losing his arms. And here in the film, they're going to show Sub-Zero freezing his arms and destroying them. So that's a little, so they changed that a little bit, which is still, you know, it's fine. It's a small nitpick. Hardcore fans might have a problem with it, but, you know, like, I'm not the biggest fan. I want to put that out there right now. I'm not the biggest Mortal Kombat fan. I've played a couple of the games, but I'm not super in tune with the storylines and the lore and all the characters and things like that. So for me, I'm not gonna have as many gripes, since, you know, I'm not the biggest fan. The first game I played was Mortal Kombat 4 on the Nintendo 64. I didn't really play them too much, and then I played Mortal Kombat 10 on, like, the Xbox 360, I think it was, or something like that. So, like, I played a couple. I haven't really, so I'm not the biggest fan. Like, I like Mortal Kombat, but it's not one of those things where I play all the games. So I have some knowledge, not a lot of knowledge. So I've had to do some research for this to try to get some things together that I didn't know, since like I said, I'm not well versed. So the film, Jax is losing his arms thanks to Sub-Zero. There was a really cool scene, though, when they're fighting, where Jax goes to fire his gun, his shotgun, and right when he fires it, Sub-Zero freezes it, and you can see the pellets freezing in the air before they fully, you know, get away from the gun. That was cool. I like that. And that's also going to be, like, one of the things where they're going to keep showing that guns are useless. So that's, like, the first time you'll see that, where they'll try to use guns, and then they're completely useless against these beings with supernatural abilities. Alright, so then we jump to Gary, Indiana. Well, I guess first Cole drops his family off at some random location, and then he goes to find this Sonya Blade. So he goes to, like, this junkyard or something, I don't even know. He ends up having to jump over some razor wire on a fence or whatever. He finds her, and she goes and gives him the whole story of Mortal Kombat, yada yada, so now he understands what the mark means and why they're being hunted and all that nonsense. So now we have that part of the story kind of done. Meanwhile, she has Kano tied up, and they have their little banter, and then you find out that he has the marking only because he also killed somebody who had the marking. So now we know that the only way you can become a champion is you either have to kill the previous champion, or it gets passed on to you by family lineage. Kind of the precipice that they put up in for this plot. But they never explain what happens if a champion kills a champion, though, because you're going to have that happening too. Other champions are going to kill other champions. They don't explain what happens when that happens. You know that if a non-champion kills a champion, then they become a champion, and you know that if a champion dies, but they have a descendant, then it goes to them. But yeah, they never explained in the film what happens if a champion kills a champion. Yeah, they just never explain how that goes within the plot that they're developing for the storyline here. So that's open-ended. We don't know. We don't know. So they get attacked at this building where they're kind of like hiding out by Reptile. Now this is something that I also was kind of put off with, because Reptile is a really good character when it comes to the video games. And I feel like they kind of misused him. They definitely misused Reptile in this film. He only uses his acid to break into the building, and he used it one time on, like, a knife or something that was, like, jabbed into him. But otherwise he didn't use his acid spray, which is something that he would use all the time. So they took one of his most powerful abilities and they underplayed that. They had him pretty much stay invisible the whole time and just do some scratching and clawing. He has very strong claws, and he only scratched Kano once during this entire confrontation. So he only used his claws the one time, and he only used his acid spray, like I said, to break into the facility, as well as to, get rid of a knife that was, lodged into his body. He only used it for defense. He didn't really do anything offensively. He pretty much just played defense the entire fight, which is weird because he had the element of surprise, and then he went on the defense, which it's just poorly done in my opinion. They definitely should have did better with Reptile. It just makes no sense to give him ambush tactics and then put him on full defense. It was just weird. I didn't like it. So there's that. So for anybody out there who's a Reptile fan, maybe he's your main character in the game, I'm sorry. Your boy is done dirty in this movie. I'm sorry. Alright. And then we'll move on. There's going to be some foreshadowing again. Kano is going to spit on a garden gnome, and he's going to say that he hates gnomes. This is foreshadowing, because they're going to later, use that. We'll get to it. Actually, I can just jump to it. Otherwise I might forget. So anyways, he spits on this garden gnome, and then later on in the movie, Sonya and him are going to have their battle, and she's going to use the garden gnome to kill him. Which I found that is a missed opportunity, because when she kills him, she jams the pointed hat of the gnome into his eye and kills him that way. I saw that as a missed opportunity. For me and my twisted humor, I felt that they should have had her stick the gnome's hand in his eye. The hand that he spit on, I feel like she should have jabbed that hand in his eye, so then he would have spit in his own eye, kind of a thing. Raiden's character, eventually they're going to go out and they're going to find this temple where Raiden and Kung Lao and Liu Kang are chilling. Jax was brought there at some point. Somehow they already found him and brought him there. They're repairing his arms or whatever, the best that they can. So they go there to get, to learn more of what's going on and to get some training. They have to find their inner power, which I think they called Arcana. This part is kind of weird too, because in the games, Raiden is always seen as he's more friendly, and then in the film he's a lot more bitter, so he's kind of out of character. It's a little thing, which I guess it could work out because they mentioned how, they've already lost 9 tournaments, so he's had to watch a lot of Earth's champions die for centuries and centuries. So I can understand why he may have become bitter over time. But at the same time, that's always kind of been the story of Mortal Kombat. Earth Realm is always on the verge of being defeated, and Raiden has always been a lot more laid back and friendly than cold and bitter and and aggressive. So it's just, they mess with his character a bit. So you have that. You have also, it's interesting with the film adaptation, Kung Lao and Liu Kang in the games always had this kind of rivalry between the two of them, but in the film they have more of this brotherly bond. So they kind of changed that dynamic as well. I mean, it works for the film. It was just, like I said, if you're really big into the games, you're gonna notice these differences. So they changed the characters with that dynamic as well. I'm trying to just kind of fast forward through this so I don't take up too much time. There's going to be Shang Tsung is going to be like, yo, I want to destroy these champions before the tournament comes or whatever, because I guess the rules are, you can fight before the tournament or whatever. I guess he wants to cheat without cheating. I don't know. Anyways, he's the big bad guy of the film, and they kind of changed his character a bit too. From the games, he's always more suave, and in the film, they made him more of that demonic villain kind of character. So that's a little different. So he ends up bringing, his crew with him, Sub-Zero, and he brings Reptile with, and Natara, Goro. I'm trying to think off the top of my head, who else did he bring? Cabal, and he might have had some others I can't remember off the top of my head. He brings them with. He's like, yo, we're gonna destroy you all and whatnot. Raiden's like, I can't interfere, but you know, you're not gonna do this here. So he puts up like a force field to protect his temple and the Earth champions within, because they're still trying to do their training and find their Akana or whatever. Kano ends up, you know, getting really angry, and this was like, I guess that this was intentional to get him to find his. And so because he gets super angry, he ends up tapping into his, and he gets his laser eye vision or whatever. Jax is still on recovery, so he doesn't really play a big part in this film, which is another thing. Like, Jax is one of the characters that was in the film from start to finish. He had some of like the most screen time, but he played such a minute role, so that's kind of sad too. So Jax, they didn't utilize him very well, which is weird because like the way that they showed the trailers made it seem like he had already had his arms for like 7 years and some incident happened in Brazil, but that's just the way that they clipped the scenes in the trailer, which gave us the misconception of what was going on, because actually in the film you find out that when he went to Brazil, he ended up killing the guy who was actually Earth's champion. And he got the brand, and he didn't lose his arms until after he met Cole by Sub-Zero, and now he's healing and mending. They had to explain how he gets his arms, but that just means he was on the bench, on the sidelines, for like pretty much the entire movie. So if you're a big Jax fan, I'm sorry, he's also not going to read. He's not given really any justice in the film either. Other characters are gonna, you know, get more attention, you know, actually have big battles and stuff. Jax doesn't really have any big fights. Like I said, he kind of gets shoved on the sideline for the film. Anyways, Cabal shows up, and he's all mad at Kano, because that's why he's in his, what he referred to as his Iron Lung. Now this is also a change, because in the games, Kano helped save Cabal's life, and you know, and that's why he was put in his suit. Whereas in the film, Kano ends up betraying Cabal, and he ends up in that suit, and now he wants revenge on Kano. So they they changed that storyline dynamic as well. They go to attack and bring the barrier down. All this stuff is going on. The weird thing is, Cole ends up leaving the safety of the barrier. The whole reason why he was there was, yes, he needed training and he needed answers, but he also chose to willingly to go to this temple with these guys so he could protect his family, are gonna go wherever he is. So he, you know, left his family behind to protect them. So then I just found it very weird that he would all of a sudden volunteer to leave the safety confines of the temple before his training was done to go back to get his family. In doing so, putting his family in jeopardy. It just was like a very, very dumb thing. And they did it intentionally so he could find his Akana. But I just hated that they did that, because it just contradicted everything that he was doing. You know, you don't go and be like, yo, I'm gonna protect my family and I'm gonna, you know, and then go back and put him in danger. It made no dang sense. So then he and his family end up getting attacked by Goro. And Goro is pretty much wiping the floor with Cole. Alright, he's no match for Goro, which would make sense. He's got no abilities at this point in the game, and Goro's a really big dude, alright, very strong dude. So it would make sense that he would just destroy Cole. But then they did something that just kind of bothered me. They had the wife get involved, and she ends up taking a wood chopping axe, slicing it into Goro's side to kind of give her husband some time to recover, which I didn't like that, honestly. I understand that they have to keep Cole alive because he's tied to Scorpion's character, but he's a worthless character. For me, it would have been quite the twist if Cole would have died right then and there, you know? That would have been, I would have like kind of, for me, I would like to see how the writers could have, you know, wrote it to where the hero dies like halfway through the film, and how that, you know, would have changed, because that would have been interesting. But no, he doesn't die. The wife and daughter flee to their vehicle, and they basically are playing like this game of cat and mouse with Goro until Cole gets his Akana, which they had the foreshadowing, like I mentioned, where he was this washed up MMA fighter who pretty much all he was good at was taking hits. So what is his Akana? It's armor that allows him to take hits, and then he can redirect that energy back and make weapons out of it or whatever. So they did the foreshadowing where he's a punching bag, and now he's a more powerful punching bag. So whatever. So he ends up taking like all these hits from Goro, and then in turn he's able to slice off one of Goro's hands, and then he ends up like stabbing him in the eye, and that's the end of Goro. Which, again, I didn't like that fight at all. Goro is such a strong dude. Either he should have just killed Cole, or Cole and his family should have had to flee, and then there should have been a bigger battle with Goro. This was another moment where I felt that there was an injustice to Goro's character, where they kind of did away with him very easily, when he's probably one of the most powerful characters that was there. So I didn't like that either. So that's another. If you're a Goro fan, I'm sorry, your boy gets gets done dirty as well. So yeah, it's one of these things. This kind of happens a lot in the film, where there's some pretty awesome characters and they just don't utilize them properly. So we had Reptile not utilized properly. Now we have Goro not utilized properly. Later on, they're gonna show Netara. She's another character who's not utilized properly. They literally have her fly around and then die. And I'm just like, that's just stupid. So they pretty much had her character there for one purpose and one purpose only. It was for the fan service moment where Kung Lao ends up killing Netara with his saw-bladed thing with his hat. And then he, has this little quip, flawless victory or whatever. I didn't like it. I did not like that happened. The way that he killed her, though, with the fatality or whatever, that was cool. Like, the fight, that was really, really cool. But I didn't like how they did the fight, where, like, she literally didn't do anything. She swoops in, he jumps on her back, throws her into the hat, and it's over. It was like, she did nothing. She did nothing. She was just a useless character. So so it's just, I didn't like that. I would have liked it to have been an actual fight between them, because she does have her own skill set, and she uses blood as one of her things for her power. So that they could have definitely utilized that, and then they just made her a worthless character that dies off just so they can have their funny little flawless victory moment, and I just didn't like it at all. Now they do that quite a bit in the film, where they try to get like these key catchphrases used up, and sometimes it was nice having them, and sometimes it was just like it was unnecessary. And the flawless victory thing right here was unnecessary. I forgot to mention it before, but during the fight with Kano and Reptile, Kano ends up killing Reptile by ripping his heart out, and then he says Kano wins. In that moment, I liked that fan service, because, with Kano saying Kano wins, that one wasn't as tacky. I liked it in that moment. It worked in that moment, because it was the first time they'd done it in the movie, so it wasn't overplayed just yet. So that one worked. But then with Kung Lao doing the flawless victory thing with Netara, it just was like, I didn't really care for it too much. They could have did without that. I would have rather they, like I said, forgone the flawless victory quip and just actually gave him an actual battle with Netara. That would have been dope. But we didn't get a fight. We just got a quick death. So, disappointing. Let's see what else happens. Like I said, I'm gonna be doing this stuff out of order in the movie, because I can't remember exactly what order this stuff took place in. Sonya ends up killing Kano, like I said, with the garden gnome, and then she ends up getting the mark from him, which is kind of like a repeating factor in the film, where an evil person gets killed by a good person. In case you don't understand what I'm saying, there was a bad guy in Brazil, Jax killed him, got the mark. Kano was the bad guy, Sonya kills him, gets the mark. Liu Kang, the bad guy, was like this trafficker, and he killed him and got the mark. So they kept repeating this, the good guy gets the mark from killing the bad guy kind of routine. So that got recycled quite heavily. Later on, you're finally gonna get to the part where Sub-Zero and Cole are fighting. Sub-Zero ends up recreating the moment where how he defeated Hanzo's family by freezing them or whatever, and he ends up doing it in the gym, in like the boxing gym that Cole, you know, did his MMA fighting and training. So he's there trying to save his family. Before he went there, though, Raiden gave him the kunai that Hanzo died with, so his blood was still on it. Okay, so they kept his blood on this thing for 400 years. And he didn't pass it on to Hanzo's daughter. He just kept it for himself until this moment. Again, questions, no answers. You know, like, I feel like that would have been a family heirloom that he would have given to the baby, but no, I guess he just kept it because, you know, he knew 400 years from now this was gonna be used to summon Scorpion from the nether realm, you know, so, you know, whatever. He ends up fighting Sub-Zero. Sub-Zero tries to stop Cole from attacking him with the kunai, ends up cutting Cole's finger with the kunai, so then Cole's blood merges with Hanzo's blood, summoning Hanzo from the nether realm, where he's been just chilling, learning how to control Hellfire, and becoming Scorpion. This part makes no dang sense in the film. Hanzo was pretty evenly matched by Han during their tiff 400 years ago. And then his time, the nether realm, allowed him to become more powerful. So he's more powerful than he was when he got defeated the first time, but instead of them showing that he's more powerful, they need him to fight side by side with Cole, someone who can barely fight, in order to beat Sub-Zero? That bothered me. That bothered me so much. Because yeah, they had like the cool moment where, you know, he used his chain with the classic, get over here moment, which, that's one of those fan service things where, yeah, I can see that needing to be in there, because it wouldn't be Scorpion without that get over here moment. So that's one that needs to be in there. Don't, cut that one out. It was just this whole thing, and then, he finds his inner strength to use Hellfire when he sees Cole's family frozen, like he saw his family frozen 400 years ago, and that allows him to dig deep and use Hellfire. I'm just like, what? You've already been spending 400 years learning how to use Hellfire. You're gonna tell me you forgot how to use it until that moment of seeing, this family distress? So that was kind of BS. But yeah, no. But my biggest issue though with this whole fight was the fact that Scorpion, who is now much stronger, couldn't fight Sub-Zero one-on-one. He needed Cole's pitiful help to do it, which was just BS. They underplayed that fight. That fight could have been so much better. And there was also this stupid moment where Sub-Zero is kind of getting beaten up and he's upset. So they're inside like the octagon, fighting or whatever. And he slams the door of the octagon behind him as kind of like a little temper tantrum, like he's upset or whatever. And I'm like, that's just so stupid. It's just stupid. I didn't like it. It's like unnecessary. Just, so little nitpick. Cabal ends up getting killed by Liu Kang by a Chinese fire dragon, which is, fine. And it was that fight. There's certain things that doesn't really need to be talked about too much, but it was just... When they did have fight scenes, I liked the fight scenes. The fight scenes were good. They weren't great, but they were good. They were entertaining, which is what you would want from a Mortal Kombat film, is you would want some good fight scenes, some good action. And they also showed, like, the gory violence, which is what you would want in a Mortal Kombat thing, which is great, because they got that R rating that people would need for a Mortal Kombat film, versus the 95 version, which was, I think, PG-13. So this was definitely a step up. The fights could have been better, because you could tell that there was a lot of, like, these jump scenes where, for like, with the editing, it just wasn't smooth. I don't want to bring up Jackie Chan, but I'm going to bring up Jackie Chan. Like, Jackie Chan, whenever you watch, like, the behind-the-scenes stuff from his films, you will see all the constant retakes on his fight scenes until he gets every little part perfect so they can do it all in one shoot. That is something that they could have benefited from, because they have real fighters in this film. So why are you cutting bits and pieces of a fight sequence and pasting them together for a fight sequence? Why not have them redo it a few times until you get it all in one fluid motion so it looks better? You know? And then they should have had more fight scenes, because this is a Mortal Kombat film. There should be a lot more fight scenes. And like I said, a lot of these characters that had fights, they were just really crappy fights, like Reptile or Goro or Natara. They didn't really get a fight scene. They just kind of got, you know, they came in and then they got destroyed, and it's just wasted opportunities to have some really awesome fight scenes. Now, overall, I did like the film. I wanted to bring out all the things that were different or things that may have irked me a little bit, but now that that's out of the way, I do want to say, overall, I did enjoy the film. I did like the film. And for them having the ending the way they did, where Cole's like, I'm going to Hollywood, because now we know, you know, and then they showed the poster too. In case people didn't get the reference, they also showed the movie poster to really drive the point home that he's going to Hollywood to get Johnny Cage. So now you know that there's going to be a sequel, which is good. My problem with this movie is the pacing of the storyline. They were rushing through the story so fast because they just wanted to have like this quick origin story, because they're trying to do like this reboot so they can get like 3-4 movies out of this. And the first movie was literally them just kind of racing through it as fast as they could to get this crap out of the way so we can get to the real movie, which will be the sequel. And that just bothers me. They could have put more time into the story development and, you know, answering a lot of these questions and having better fights to make this movie what it should have been, versus just trying to, you know, race to the finish line on it to get it out of the way, to use it as a stepping stone for the sequel. But like I said, overall, I did like the movie. I could see myself watching it again. There's plenty of movies that you know, you like the movie, but they're those kind of movies that you watch once and you're good. This is one that I could see myself watching again. I did enjoy it. I am looking forward to the sequel, and I hope the sequel has better pacing and better fight scenes, and they utilize the characters to their fullest potential instead of just half-assing it like they did with Reptile, Goro, and Natara and whatnot. I want to see these characters be used properly. Even Cabal wasn't really, he did a lot of shit talking, and then he was kind of like done over with. We need these fights to actually be really good fights. You know, they don't need to be over and done so quickly. They're champions, right? So they know how to fight. Why are their fights so quick and short? Okay, that's what happens when you have a skilled fighter with a non-skilled fighter. You're gonna have a quick over and done fight. But when you have very skilled fighters, that stuff should get drawn out longer. Those are just some takes from me on the film. I would love to hear what you guys thought about the movie. Like I said, there were some things I had issues with. I found the movie to be enjoyable. I did. So, yeah, go ahead and reach out to me, tell me what you thought, and stick around because I hope to have another episode of Just a Glimpse out soon. Tell your friends and family and spread the word and help me get my show out there because I need all of you. So thank you guys for listening. And I'll catch you all next time. Are you someone who is into podcasts? Perhaps you want to have a really cool library where you can find some great podcasts to listen to on your commute to work. Or maybe you're looking to create one yourself. Well, let me tell you about Anchor. It's the easiest way to make a podcast, all right? It's free. It has creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or your PC. Anchor will also distribute your podcast for you. Complete ease, hassle-free. So that way you can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, as well as many more outlets. You can also make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. Okay, folks? Everything you need to make a podcast in one place. It's fantastic. All right. And if you want to get started right now, all you got to do is download the free Anchor app, or go to anchor.fm to get started.